Even though a police officer visited my house, I didn't panic because it was a familiar face. However, I was too naive. My heart rate skyrocketed when I heard the officer's words. "I'm arresting your wife on suspicion of fraud. I need to interrogate her immediately." As soon as Chris Miller said that, he pushed me away, ignoring my attempt to stop him, and forced his way into the house. Then he made a serious declaration. The victim, who claims to have been defrauded, says they will forgive her if they get their money back. "Can you cover the $10,000 loss right now?" $10,000. I can't do that immediately, I replied. Chris Miller, dissatisfied with my answer, coldly stated, "Then I'll take your wife with me. We can't tolerate people who cunningly deceive others out of their money." At first, I was confused, but the more I listened, the more it didn't add up. Did my wife really commit fraud? She's been hospitalized for 2 years. Excuse me, your wife is supposed to be working for a major trading company, right? As I listened to Chris Miller's story, doubts grew stronger in my mind. My name is Mike Jones. I am a company employee in my 30s. Though I'm in my prime working years, I can't fully focus on my job. My family members are my wife, Nancy, and our third-grade son, James. Nancy has been hospitalized for the past 2 years due to her health issues. Believing that Nancy's condition will improve, I finish work on time to dedicate myself to household chores and parenting. After 2 years, I've become accustomed to this lifestyle, efficiently handling laundry and cooking while helping James with his homework. Sometimes I have to work on weekends, but I still manage to visit Nancy with James 2 or 3 times a month. Most of my thoughts are occupied with wanting Nancy to get better soon. But recently, something else has been troubling me. I've been sensing some unsettling activity around our neighborhood. One day, after stopping by the supermarket on my way home from work, I noticed a person dressed as a police officer loitering nearby. "Good evening. Are you on patrol? Is something wrong?" I asked. The officer seemed surprised, not having noticed me behind him. Apologizing for startling him, I inquired further. He took out his badge and spoke in a hushed tone. "There have been several reports of suspicious individuals in this area. An adult wearing sunglasses and a mask has been approaching children. Please be cautious and report any suspicious persons." After showing me his badge with his photo and the name Chris Miller, he explained that there seemed to be some dangerous people lurking around here. As I thought about warning James when I got home, Chris Miller just glanced at me and left. "I just met a police officer. There have been some suspicious people around lately, so be careful, James." I urged James to be cautious while putting away the groceries. He responded absent-mindedly while doing his homework. He's becoming more boyish, but he also seems to ignore what I say, which worries me. "Are you even listening?" I asked in exasperation, but my mind suddenly filled with something else. "James, sorry. I forgot to set the slow cooker this morning. I'll cook it now, so take a bath first." I hurriedly opened the slow cooker, and the rising steam made me cough. "Calm down, Dad," James said, exasperated this time. "I had turned it on also. You keep putting the laundry in the wrong place. Please remember after one reminder." At work, people praise me for handling household chores and parenting alone, but James is much more responsible than I am. It's probably because of such a son that we've managed even without Nancy. "If your mom doesn't come home soon, we'll be troubling you, James," I joked. James pursed his lips tightly. "It's fine. I'll help around the house. Mom needs to get better first. Even when she comes back, I'll keep helping at home," James said, tears in his eyes and a furrowed brow. James believes that Nancy ended up hospitalized because he caused her trouble. There was a day when we visited Nancy, and due to the side effects of her medication, she lost all her energy and vomited repeatedly in front of James. If James isn't a good boy, it makes things hard for Mom. Before Nancy's illness was discovered, James had been scolded by her with these words, and it stuck with him strongly. That's why he vowed never to trouble his mother again. Let's visit Mom this weekend. She's looking forward to seeing how well you're doing in school. Now, let's finish your homework after dinner." Saying this cheerfully, James seemed happy about seeing Nancy and excitedly helped with the meal preparations. The week passed quickly, and the day to visit Nancy arrived. James, in a good mood since morning, said enthusiastically, "Let's buy the cheesecake Mom likes before we go. I don't think she can eat heavy stuff, but if she doesn't want it, you can eat it," I replied. With that, we bought a popular cheesecake at the station's gift shop and visited the hospital room. Nancy seemed relatively well that day, but had a troubled expression. I took the chance to talk to her while James went to the bathroom. Though relieved it wasn't about her health, the content was disturbing. Recently, I've been getting silent phone calls. They don't say anything, but the call is definitely connected. Sometimes it lasts up to 5 minutes. That's creepy. Actually, there have been police patrolling around our place because of some suspicious individuals. The world is a dangerous place. Whether from news reports or social media, all I hear is bad news. I hope Nancy's health improves soon, and we can have a peaceful life, but it's hard not to worry these days. But silent calls must be mentally exhausting. You haven't reported this to the police yet, right? There's no direct harm, and I didn't think anyone would come to the hospital to cause trouble. What are you saying? It's too late if something happens. I'll talk to the police patrolling near our house. As we were talking, James returned. Since James was looking forward to this visit, we decided to end our heavy conversation. We enjoyed the cheesecake and had a pleasant chat together. The following week, when I returned from work, I saw Chris Miller patrolling. I thought it was a good opportunity to discuss the silent calls, but he was deep in conversation with James. "Officer, thank you for your service, James. Have you finished your homework?" "I finished it a while ago. I was playing with my friends and just got back." I nodded at James's reply and then turned to Chris Miller. "Sorry to bother you at work, but I'm concerned about something. Could I have a moment of your time?" "Of course, what's going on?" Having someone around to protect us is incredibly reassuring. However, I didn't want James to hear about this. He's already worried about Nancy. And knowing about the silent calls would affect his studies and daily life. "James, could you go home and warm this up for me?" "What? No. I want to hear what you're talking about." "This has nothing to do with you, James. Go inside now." I asked James to warm up the food I bought, but he refused. Sensing my intent, Chris Miller stepped in to help. "James, you're such a good helper at home. That's impressive." However, James wasn't easily swayed by such simple words. Feeling bad for holding up Chris Miller, I decided to leave, but he said, "I'm around here every day, so feel free to talk to me anytime," and left. I thanked him and waved goodbye with James. Back home, as James and I were eating dinner, he started talking with his mouth full of food. "That officer is really a nice guy, isn't he?" "Yeah, we should appreciate the tough job of protecting our town." "By the way, what were you talking about before I got here? Did he mention any new sightings?" Remembering James's serious conversation with Chris Miller, I asked casually. However, James's response clouded my mind. He asked if you always come home at this time, when Mom is coming back, and if anyone else lives with us. He said there have been burglaries around here. I had never heard of any burglaries in the neighborhood. Maybe he was concerned about whether we live alone or have support because James is still young. But it felt intrusive, like our life was being scrutinized. "I hope nothing happens and we can live peacefully, James. Remember not to share too much about our home with others, okay?" James seemed unconvinced, but he replied, "Okay." So I left it at that. About a month later, as we were getting ready to visit Nancy, the intercom rang. Visitors were rare, so I assumed it was a salesperson. Looking at the monitor, I saw Chris Miller. "Good morning. Is everything okay?" I greeted him while opening the door. Even though a police officer visited my house, I didn't panic because it was a familiar face. However, I was too complacent. My heart rate skyrocketed when I heard Chris Miller's words. I'm arresting your wife on suspicion of fraud. I need to interrogate her immediately. As soon as Chris Miller said that, he pushed past me, ignoring my attempt to stop him, and forced his way into the house. Can we talk? I have a child, so could we speak at the door? I lowered my voice so James, who was getting ready inside, wouldn't hear, but Chris Miller ignored this and barged into the living room. Then he made a serious declaration. Your wife is under suspicion of committing a crime. The victim, who claims to have been defrauded, says they will forgive her if they get their money back. Can you cover the $10,000 loss right now? $10,000? I can't do that immediately. I muttered, not understanding the situation. Trying to cover living expenses for two and Nancy's treatment costs on a single income left us with almost no savings. The ample savings we had when Nancy was working were nearly depleted now. Then I'll take your wife with me. We can't tolerate people who cunningly deceive and extort money from the vulnerable. Listening to Chris Miller, I felt a disconnect with the image of Nancy I knew. Are you sure my wife committed fraud? She's been hospitalized for the past 2 years. What? Your wife is supposed to be working for a major trading company, right? Hearing Chris Miller's words, my doubts began to grow. How does Chris Miller know Nancy's previous workplace? It's possible James mentioned it, but he doesn't know what a trading company is and couldn't clearly answer about Nancy's job, often turning it into a joke. Even though he's a police officer, it's unlikely he knows every resident's occupation. If he had checked, he would know Nancy had retired. Chris Miller, can I see your police ID again? He visibly showed signs of agitation at my request. At this point, I was convinced he wasn't a real police officer, but I didn't want to push too hard and provoke him. James was in the house, and I needed to avoid any danger to him. Chris Miller quickly regained his composure, trying to maintain a facade of authority. If your wife isn't here, you'll have to come with me. What will it be? Will you come to the station with me, or will you settle by paying the money? Of course, I'll have to handcuff you on the way to the police station. Looking outside, I noticed there was no police car. Although he had handcuffs, they didn't seem very solid and looked fake. They looked like something you could buy at a toy store. I couldn't pay the money, but I also didn't want to be taken away without knowing what might happen. I grabbed my smartphone, pretending to be scared, and pleaded with Chris Miller. I have a relative who can lend me the money. Can I call to ask them to transfer it? That way, James and I don't have to leave here, right? Chris Miller thought for a moment and then nodded. Fine, but you make the call here. If you try to escape, I'll have to call for backup. Thank you, I said, opening the contacts app. I wanted to call the police, but Chris Miller would overhear the conversation and was watching my every move. So, I decided to contact an intelligent friend of mine who is a lawyer. He knew about Nancy's illness and often visited her. Please pick up. My wish was granted when he answered after a few rings. Sorry to call you suddenly, but can you lend me about $10,000? I promise I'll pay you back. What's going on? He asked, worried. I continued speaking. Nancy allegedly committed fraud by visiting an elderly person's home and tricking them out of their money. If we pay $10,000 right away, it should settle everything. Please help. Wait, but Nancy. Please, the police are in my house right now. They said it could be settled this way. It probably seemed odd to him, but that was fine. As I continued explaining, he seemed to understand the situation. You're at home, right? He confirmed, then said, I'll transfer the money today. Just wait. And hung up. The money issue should be resolved. I'll pay by today. I told Chris Miller, who nodded in satisfaction. Then transfer the money to the account I'll give you. If I assist you, it could jeopardize my position. Once I confirm the payment, I won't bother you again. He handed me a note with the account details and headed for the door. As I opened the door, a loud voice shouted from the room. Mom wouldn't do that. You're a liar. Apparently, James had been listening, and he glared at Chris Miller, his shoulders heaving with anger. Chris Miller looked surprised by James's outburst, but quickly regained his composure, thinking he was just a child. James, I understand you don't want to believe it, but your mom committed a crime. People must pay for their wrongdoings. James, reacting to the word criminal, became even more furious and confronted Chris Miller. Shut up. You're the criminal. It's you who will be caught when the police are called. Hearing James's loud commotion at the entrance, neighbors started to gather, wondering what was happening. Seeing the police among them, the crowd of onlookers quickly grew. Panicking, Chris Miller tried to make an excuse and escape. Seizing the moment, James shouted loudly, "That man is a bad person. Catch him." The onlookers, reacting to James's call, restrained Chris Miller. As he tried to break free and run, the neighbors fully tackled and restrained him. At almost the same time, a police car arrived. The real police had come. I felt immense relief, but knew I couldn't appear weak while James was showing such bravery. I walked toward the officer who stepped out of the police car to explain the situation. The officer checked my name and said, "We received a report from someone claiming to be your friend." I then explained the situation. I mentioned that someone claimed my wife was suspected of fraud and said that paying the money would settle it. The officers shook their heads, saying, "That's impossible." He had been patrolling around our place recently and had a police ID, so I didn't suspect anything. I said. The police took the ID from Chris Miller. They said it was a well-made fake and that no one named Chris Miller worked in their department. It was indeed a scam with someone pretending to be a police officer. Chris Miller struggled desperately as they tried to put him into the police car. I was just following orders. It's not my fault. Besides, this guy's wife works for a major company, and they're rich. Rich people should share some money with the poor. His baseless and selfish words infuriated me. Before I could say anything, James shouted back at him. My mom is fighting an illness and is in the hospital. My dad works hard for us. Don't act like you're the only one suffering. Chris Miller fell silent after James's outburst. The gathered neighbors also agreed with James, applauding and supporting him. Unable to respond, Chris Miller quietly got into the police car. It turned out that my friend had called the police, sensing something was wrong from our phone conversation. According to my lawyer friend, Chris Miller, who used a fake name and pretended to be a cop, would be appropriately punished. Later, the police informed me that Chris Miller was also involved in other incidents besides this one. The silent calls to Nancy were also from Chris Miller, suggesting he had some malicious scheme. He had a history of fraud, deceiving people to obtain money and illegal profits. He held seminars with a group, claiming they would invest the money and give returns, but hardly invested any of it. He returned about 10% as dividends, and then lied about investment failures to embezzle the rest. Handling others' money requires a license, which Chris Miller didn't have. Additionally, forging a police ID is a crime. Given his numerous offenses, my lawyer friend and the police believe he will receive a heavy sentence. He must pay for his crimes. And the most important thing is that James wasn't harmed. The police and neighbors praised you, James. They said you stood up well against a bad adult. James upheld his sense of justice and fought against the villain. As a parent, it was a nerve-wracking action, but I was proud of James's bravery. Embarrassed by the praise, James blushed and looked away, saying, "It's nothing. You knew our kind mom would never do something like that, right?" "Of course, I believe in both mom and you, James." Hearing my words, James smiled happily. Despite everything, I was just glad nothing serious happened. "Did you finish your homework?" I asked James. He widened his eyes and hurried to his room. "Oh no, I have an essay due tomorrow." I sighed, saying, "Oh boy." But I was relieved that our usual routine had returned. Later, the incident was briefly mentioned in a local newspaper. The headline read, "Bravery of elementary school student leads to arrest." "Mom, this is about me. James insisted on bringing the newspaper to show Nancy during our visit. Even though I had already told her, and the hospital had several newspapers, including the local one. Nancy acted surprised, as if she was seeing it for the first time. "No way, is that really you, James? It can't be." "It's true, look, it says James Jones right here." As James eagerly pointed out his name, Nancy reacted with exaggerated surprise, making James even more excited. Watching the two of them with a smile, I also told Nancy about what happened. "James was really brave," he shouted. "My mom would never do that," and scared the criminal. "Did James really say that? He's grown up so much, thank you," Nancy said, patting James's head. For some reason, James had tears in his eyes. When Nancy, looking concerned, asked, "What's wrong?" James replied in a small voice, "I've been good and tried hard, so I wouldn't trouble you. Please get better soon. I think you got sick because of me." Nancy gently hugged James as he started to cry. "This illness isn't your fault, James. God gave me this challenge, but it's one I can overcome. It's going to be okay." Nancy then seemed to remember something and added, "I once said, if you don't behave, Mom will get sick. But that wasn't true. I'm sorry I said that." Tears filled Nancy's eyes too, and the sound of their sniffles echoed in the hospital room. The doctor said, "If I keep improving like this, I might be able to go home soon. I'm going to keep trying, so please wait for me." Recently, Nancy seemed to be doing really well. If things continued as the doctor said, she might be discharged soon. I prayed with all my heart for that to come true. A few months later, Nancy's battle with illness came to an end. There were times we didn't know what would happen. But thanks to the doctor's dedicated treatment and Nancy's efforts, she was able to return to a normal life. Today is James's open house at school. It's been a long time since Nancy and I have gone to see James at school together. James has become quite responsible," Nancy said. Indeed, James stood confidently in front of the blackboard. Today's theme for the open house was Dreams for the Future, and the students were presenting essays they had written. I remembered seeing James revising his essay several times a few months ago. I usually check his homework, but he insisted on keeping this essay a secret, so today was the first time I would hear it. "My dream for the future is to become a police officer. I have caused a lot of trouble for my dad and mom, but from now on, I won't cause any more trouble. I've been treated kindly by many people, and I want to repay their kindness by becoming a police officer. I know there are many kind people around me, but I've also experienced that not everyone in the world is kind. I want to protect my loved ones from such people. I've learned that becoming a police officer isn't easy, but my mom taught me that we can overcome any challenge. She faced a tough illness but fought hard and is recovering. I want to grow up to be an adult who doesn't give up, just like my mom. If anything happens, I'll protect my dad and mom." Hearing James speak passionately, Nancy and I couldn't help but cry. I made a firm vow to become a father who can protect his family.
I'm Carla, and this is my story. After college, I dove headfirst into the working world. My parents had drummed it into my head since I was knee-high. Kids gotta stand on their own 2 feet. So there I was, fresh diploma in hand, hustling to find a job while my classmates were still nursing hangovers from grad parties. Landed a decent gig at a marketing firm. Nothing flashy, but it paid the bills. Found a tiny apartment too, more of a shoebox with a kitchenette, really. But it was mine, and that meant something. Meanwhile, my kid sister Lily, she was still living it up at home, not a care in the world. Mom and Dad fawned over her, like she was the second coming or something. "Lily doesn't need to work," Mom would say, stroking my sister's perfect blonde hair. "She's got her looks. That's her gift to the world." Don't get me wrong, I love Lily. But Christ, the difference in how we were raised. It was like night and day. I was pushed to study, get good grades, prepare for a career. Lily? She was told she was pretty. That was enough, apparently. One time, I overheard Dad talking to Lily. "Sweetheart, you don't need to worry about college or jobs. Just focus on your beauty pageants. That's your future. Lily ate it up, of course. Why wouldn't she? She'd been in those damn pageants since she could walk. Wanted to be a model, she said, until she found out models actually had to, work. Wait, they have to diet and exercise and learn languages? Lily had whined. That sounds hard. I don't want to do that. So instead, she just existed, at home, on our parents' dime. Me? I was busting my ass at work, pinching pennies, building up a little nest egg. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd earned it. I tried not to let it get to me, how different things were for us. But some nights, alone in my crappy apartment, eating microwave dinners and going over budget spreadsheets, yeah, it stung a bit. But that was life, right? Some people get the easy road, some don't. I told myself I was stronger for it, more prepared for the real world. If only I'd known what was coming. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. Just a regular Tuesday. I remember because I'd treated myself to takeout, a rare splurge. I was sitting on my secondhand couch, trying to ignore the springs digging into my back, when my phone rang. Mom's voice on the phone was shaky. Carla, honey, you need to come home. It's your father. He's had a stroke. We need your help. The drive to my parents' house was a blur of streetlights and worry. When I arrived, Mom looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. Dad was in the hospital, stable, but weak. I can't do this alone, Carla, Mom said, clutching my hand. I'm working overtime to cover the medical bills. Can you help with your father's care? Of course, I agreed. What else could I do? I started sending money for a nurse and spending my weekends at my parents' house. It was exhausting, juggling work and family responsibilities, but I managed. Then came the kicker. Carla, Mom said one Sunday evening as I was packing up to head back to my apartment. Why don't you move back home for a few months? It would save us the nurse fees and you'd be here all the time. I had my doubts. Big ones. But looking at Mom's exhausted face and thinking of Dad in his hospital bed, I caved. Okay, Mom, I'll do it. So I packed up my little apartment, said goodbye to my neighbors, and moved back into my childhood bedroom. It felt surreal, like stepping back in time. The commute to work was a nightmare. An hour and a half each way, if traffic was kind. But I gritted my teeth and bore it. This was for Dad, I reminded myself. Dad came home from the hospital a week after I moved back. He was frail, a shadow of his former self. But when he saw me, his face lit up. My girl, he said, his words slurred but warm. You're here. Those moments made it worth it. The gratitude in Dad's eyes, the way he'd squeeze my hand when I helped him with his exercises or brought him his meals. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. Mom, on the other hand, that was a different story. Nothing I did seemed to be enough for her. If I cooked, the food was too bland. If I cleaned, I missed a spot. If I spent an extra 5 minutes talking to Dad, I was neglecting my other chores. Carla, I asked you to do the laundry hours ago, she'd snap. And have you changed your father's sheets yet? I bit my tongue, reminding myself that Mom was under a lot of stress. She was working long hours, worried sick about Dad, trying to keep everything together. But still, her constant criticism wore me down. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, followed by hours of household chores, I collapsed onto my bed, utterly exhausted. Carla! Mom's shrill voice cut through my moment of peace. I need you to help your father with his bath. I dragged myself up, ignoring the protest of my aching muscles. As I helped Dad into the bathroom, he patted my hand. You're a good girl, Carla, he said softly. Don't know what we'd do without you. I smiled, feeling a lump in my throat. This was why I was here. This was what mattered. But later that night, as I lay in bed listening to Mom complain to someone on the phone about how Carla just doesn't seem to understand how much help we need, I couldn't help but wonder, why am I the only one trying to please everyone? As the days blurred together in an endless cycle of work and caregiving, I couldn't help but notice the glaring absence of my sister, Lily. While I was running myself ragged, Lily was living her best life, untouched by the family crisis. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of her swanning out the front door, designer handbag swinging from her arm. "Where are you off to?" I called out, elbow deep in dishwater. Lily tossed her hair over her shoulder. "Oh, just meeting the girls for mani-pedis and lunch. Don't wait up." The door slammed behind her, leaving me in stunned silence. I looked down at my prune-like fingers, then at the mountain of chores still waiting for me. The contrast was so stark it was almost laughable. But the worst part? Lily's complete disregard for Dad's condition. She couldn't even bear to be in the same room when I was feeding him. I'd see her wrinkle her nose and dash off to her bedroom, plate in hand, muttering something about not having the stomach for it. One particularly grueling day, after a hellish commute and hours of overtime, I dragged myself home to find Mom in a state. "Carla, where have you been? Your father needs his dinner." I bit back a retort about having to work to pay for said dinner, and quietly went about preparing Dad's meal. As I spooned pureed vegetables into his mouth, careful not to spill a drop, an idea struck me. "Mom," I said cautiously, "have you considered maybe sending Dad to a specialized care facility?" Just for a while, the spoon clattered to the floor as Mom whirled on me, eyes blazing. "How dare you!" she shrieked. "Your own father, after everything we've done for you." "Mom, please listen. They have professionals there. They could help Dad recover faster, maybe even—" "Ungrateful!" Mom cut me off. "I knew it. You just don't want to help us. Well, let me tell you something, Missy. You'll do as I say in this house. If you can't handle it, there's the door." I stayed. I worked. I cooked. I cleaned. I cared for Dad. Every paycheck went straight into Mom's hands, ostensibly for household expenses and medical bills. I was back to being a teenager, asking for an allowance to buy necessities. One evening, as I was scrubbing the kitchen floor, I heard Lily's tinkling laugh from the living room. She was sprawled on the couch, FaceTiming with friends, planning their next shopping spree. "Oh my God, you have to see these shoes I bought today," she gushed. "They cost a fortune, but Daddy's credit card can handle it." I scrubbed harder, my knuckles turning white around the brush handle. Daddy's credit card. The same Daddy who couldn't feed himself. The same Daddy whose medical bills I was helping to pay. It was well past midnight when the front door banged open, startling me awake. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, a half-folded basket of laundry at my feet. Lily's high-pitched giggle echoed through the house, accompanied by a deeper, unfamiliar laugh. "Don't laugh so loud, you'll wake everyone up," Lily stage whispered, not sounding particularly concerned. I rubbed my eyes, squinting at the clock. 2:37 a.m. Great. Lily stumbled into the living room, dragging a tall, scruffy-looking guy behind her. "Oh, Carla!" she exclaimed, as if surprised to find me in my own home. "You're up!" "Meet Brad." Brad gave me a lazy salute. "Sup?" Before I could respond, Lily thrust her left hand in my face. A gaudy diamond ring glittered on her finger. "We're engaged!" she squealed. "Oh, and Brad's moving in. Hope that's cool." I stood there speechless as Lily dragged her new fiancé upstairs, leaving me with the echo of her giggles and the faint smell of alcohol. The next morning, I stumbled into the kitchen to find Mom fawning over Lily and Brad. "Oh, sweetie, I'm so happy for you," she gushed, refilling Brad's coffee cup. "You make such a handsome couple." I quietly poured myself some coffee, trying to make sense of this new development. Mom turned to me, her smile fading slightly. "You know, Carla, you should start thinking about settling down, too. You're not getting any younger." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Mom, I'm focusing on my career right now, and helping out here, remember?" Mom's eyes narrowed. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Well, it's not like you have many options anyway. Who'd want such an ugly duckling?" The words hit me like a slap. I was used to Mom's backhanded comments, but this, in front of Brad? I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. Lily snickered, and Brad looked uncomfortable, suddenly very interested in his coffee mug. I took a deep breath, trying to change the subject. So, where exactly is Brad going to stay? The house is pretty full already, with Dad's medical equipment and all. Lily's eyes flashed. What's that supposed to mean? You don't want us here? No, that's not, I started, but Lily cut me off. God, Carla, you're so jealous. Just because you can't find a man doesn't mean you have to rain on my parade. I gaped at her. Jealous? Lily, I'm just trying to be practical. Dad needs... Oh, enough about Dad, Lily snapped. Everything's always about Dad with you. Maybe if you focused on yourself a little more, you wouldn't be so bitter and alone. Girls, please, Mom interjected, but her stern look was directed solely at me. Carla, mind your own business. Your sister is happy, and that's what matters. I stood there, stunned into silence. My own business? Wasn't this my business too? This was my home, my family. But looking at the three of them, Mom, Lily, and Brad, I suddenly felt like an outsider. As I got dressed, I could hear them laughing and chatting downstairs. The happy family. And where did I fit in? The ugly duckling, the bitter spinster, the ungrateful daughter. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, life decided to prove me wrong. Dad suffered another stroke, more severe than the first. This time, he was left almost completely paralyzed. He could still speak, but his words were slurred, barely comprehensible. It broke my heart to see him struggle. With Dad's condition worsening, I hoped, foolishly it turned out, that Lily might step up, that she'd finally realize the gravity of the situation and lend a hand. Boy, was I wrong. Sorry, sis, Lily said, not sounding sorry at all. Brad and I are trying to build a life together. We don't have time for all this. She waved her hand dismissively towards Dad's room. I couldn't believe my ears. Build a life together? Lily, you're living in our parents' house, off their money and my income. The least you could do is help out. Lily's face hardened. Don't be such a bitch, Carla. It's not our fault Dad got sick. Girls! Mom's sharp voice cut through our argument. That's enough. Lily, dear, don't worry about it. You focus on your relationship. Carla can handle things here. I turned to Mom, incredulous. Are you serious? Mom, they're not even working. They're just freeloading. Mom's eyes flashed dangerously. Carla, how dare you? Brad isn't even related to your father. He has no obligation to help, and you should be grateful you can help your family. Some daughter you are, complaining about caring for your own father. Her words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, mouth agape, as Mom stormed off, Lily smirking behind her. From that day on, life in the house became unbearable. I'd come home from work, exhausted, only to find Lily and Brad blasting music, laughing and carrying on as if it was their own private party pad. They'd leave their mess everywhere. Dirty dishes in the sink, clothes strewn about, empty beer bottles on every surface. And the food. God, the food! I'd spend my Sundays meal prepping, trying to get ahead for the week. But come Monday, all my carefully prepared containers would be empty. More than once, I found myself at work with nothing to eat, my lunch devoured by Lily and Brad's midnight munchies. I tried talking to Mom about it, multiple times, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Mom, please, I begged one evening, after finding yet another empty fridge. Can't you talk to Lily? This isn't fair. They're just existing, at our expense. Not everyone is like you, Carla, Mom snapped. Not everyone can be Miss Independent, working themselves to the bone. Lily's still finding herself. If you're so concerned about money, maybe you should pick up some overtime. I stared at her, disbelief warring with fury in my chest. Overtime? Mom, I'm already working 60-hour weeks. I'm taking care of Dad, running the household, and apparently feeding 4 adults on my salary alone. When exactly am I supposed to sleep? Mom waved off my concerns. You're young. You can handle it. Now stop obsessing over your sister and focus on your own responsibilities. I walked away from that conversation, feeling like I'd stepped into the Twilight Zone. How had this become my life? When had I become the bad guy for expecting basic decency and contribution from my own family? The days blurred together in an endless cycle of work, chores, and caregiving. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. More and more, I found myself daydreaming about my old life, my tiny apartment, the blessed silence, the freedom. God, how I missed it. One night, after a particularly trying day, I broached the subject with Mom. "Mom, I've been thinking," I started cautiously. "Maybe we should consider hiring a nurse again. I could move back to my place, but still help out financially and visit often." Mom's face crumpled. "How can you even suggest that? After everything we've done for you." I blinked, taken aback. "Everything you've done for me?" "You're so heartless, Carla," Mom wailed, tears springing to her eyes. "How can you abandon your father like this? It's your duty to help us. Your duty!" Guilt washed over me, dousing my resolve like a bucket of cold water. I'd never been good at standing up to Mom's tears. "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "You're right. I'll stay." And so I did. I stayed and I helped, and I endured, until the day everything changed. I came home from work, bone-tired as usual, to find Lily lounging in the hallway, a self-satisfied smirk on her face. "Oh, good, you're home," she chirped. "I've got a surprise for you." Alarm bells rang in my head. Lily's surprises were never good news for me. She led me to my room, or what used to be my room. I stood in the doorway, shocked into silence. All my things were gone, replaced by racks of clothes, shoes, and makeup. My bedroom had been transformed into a walk-in closet. What is this?" I finally managed to sputter. Lily beamed. "Isn't it great? Now I have space for all my things." "But where are my things? Where am I supposed to sleep?" Lily's smile turned condescending. "Oh, don't worry. We put your stuff in some boxes in the garage. You can sleep on the couch in the living room. I mean, you're basically the help now, right? You don't need a whole room." Something in me snapped. For the first time in my life, I saw red. I stormed into the kitchen, where Mom was preparing dinner. "Mom!" I shouted, my voice shaking with rage. "Did you know about this? Lily's taken over my room. She says I have to sleep on the couch." Mom barely looked up from her cooking. "Yes, dear. Lily needs the space for her things. You'll be fine on the couch." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Fine on the couch? Mom, I live here too. I work here. I take care of Dad. I run this household. And now I don't even get a room?" Mom sighed, like I was being particularly difficult. "Carla, your sister deserves a nice dressing room. You're barely here anyway, always at work. The couch will do just fine." I stood there, trembling with anger and disbelief. Then a thought struck me. Dad. Dad would understand. Dad would take my side. I marched to his room, Mom trailing behind me. Dad was propped up in bed, his eyes following our movement. "Dad," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Lily's taken over my room. She and Mom say I have to sleep on the couch now. After everything I've done, all the care I've given you, they're treating me like I don't even live here." I waited for Dad to protest, to defend me, to show some appreciation for all I'd sacrificed. Instead, he smiled weakly and said in his slurred speech, "It's okay, Carla. Lily needs the space. You're a good girl. You understand." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Mom nodded approvingly. "See?" she said. "Your father agrees. Besides, you're only here temporarily. Once he's better, you'll move out again anyway." I stood there, frozen in disbelief. The shock of my father's words, my mother's casual dismissal of my feelings, it all crashed over me like a tidal wave. In that moment, something inside me shattered. Without a word, I turned on my heel and marched out of Dad's room. I could hear Mom calling after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My feet carried me to the garage, where I found my life unceremoniously packed away in cardboard boxes. My hands were shaking as I started pulling out suitcases, shoving clothes and personal items inside. I didn't bother folding anything. I just needed to get out. Carla? Carla, what are you doing? Mom's voice cut through the haze of my fury. I didn't look up from my packing. What does it look like I'm doing? I'm leaving. Don't be ridiculous, Mom snapped. You can't leave. Your father needs you. We need you. I barked out a laugh, harsh and humorless. Oh, you need me all right. You need my money. You need my labor. But you don't need me. Not the real me. Stop being so dramatic, Mom said, her voice rising. I forbid you to leave this house. That made me pause. I straightened up, looking my mother in the eye. Forbid me? I'm an adult, Mom. You can't forbid me to do anything. I'm not sleeping on a couch like some beggar in my own home. I'm done being your personal maid and ATM. I'm done with the ingratitude, the disrespect, all of it. Mom's face paled. But your father, you can't abandon him like this. Maybe you could rent an apartment nearby? You could still come over to help, to cook and clean. I stared at her, incredulous. Even now, she was still trying to use me. No, I said, my voice firm. No, I won't be doing that. I'm done helping. I'm done communicating. I'm just done. I shouldered past her, dragging my suitcase behind me. As I reached the front door, I turned back one last time. And Lily? Your precious baby girl who can do no wrong? She's a leech, and you're letting her bleed you dry. But that's your problem now, not mine. Mom's face contorted with rage. How dare you? After everything we've done for you, you ungrateful little... I slammed the door, cutting off her tirade. My hand was shaking as I pulled out my phone and called a cab. As I waited on the front step, suitcase by my side, I could hear Mom's muffled shouts through the door. Scoundrel! Ingrate! How could you do this to your family? Family. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. Was this really what family was supposed to be? The cab pulled up, and I loaded my suitcase into the trunk. As we pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to see the house that had once been my home, the place where I'd given everything only to be treated like nothing. I found a small studio apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That first night, sleeping on a hastily purchased air mattress, I felt a weight lift off my chest. For the first time in months, I could breathe. The peace lasted exactly 3 days. I was scrolling through social media on my lunch break when I saw it. A post from Mom. There was Dad, looking frail in his hospital bed. The caption made my blood run cold. Pray for us. Our eldest daughter has cruelly abandoned us in our time of need. How could she do this to her dying father? The comments flooded in, relatives and family friends expressing shock and disgust at my supposed heartlessness. I felt sick. But then something snapped. Enough was enough. I wrote my own post, laying out the whole ugly truth. The months of thankless labor, the financial drain, Lily's freeloading, the room theft. I never wanted it to come to this, I wrote, but I won't be painted as the villain in someone else's story. The response was immediate. The tide of public opinion turned. Suddenly, I was flooded with messages of support. Apologies from those who'd been quick to judge. It should have felt like vindication. Instead, I just felt tired. Weeks passed. I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild my savings. But guilt nagged at me. Had I done the right thing? Should I have stayed, no matter the cost to myself? Then, the call came. Dad had passed away. This is your fault, Mom spat through the phone. Don't you dare show your face at the funeral. I didn't. I sat in my apartment, alternating between tears and numbness, mourning not just my father, but the family I'd lost long before his death. Time marched on. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. I worked hard, saved every penny. Finally, I had enough for a down payment on a small, cozy apartment of my own. No more renting, no more instability. I was building my own future, brick by brick. And then, another call. Mom's voice, older now, tinged with desperation. Carla? We need your help. We had to sell the house, Lily's debts, and Brad left her. We have nowhere to go. Can we stay with you? Just until we get back on our feet? I closed my eyes, memories washing over me. The sleepless nights, the thankless days, the constant demands, the casual cruelty. No, I said, my voice calm and firm. I'm sorry, but no. Please don't call again. I ended the call, my hand shaking slightly as I set down the phone. For a moment, I sat there, half expecting guilt to overwhelm me. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt peace. The peace of knowing my worth. The peace of setting boundaries. The peace of choosing myself.
I'm Hannah, and I met John in college, and we clicked instantly. He was charming, funny, and ambitious. We got married right after graduation and started building our life together. When our daughter Sophie was born, I was over the moon. I poured all my love and energy into raising her, determined to give her the best start in life. I believed in setting boundaries and instilling discipline. Knowledge is power, I'd always tell her. Study hard and you'll go far. John, on the other hand, had a different parenting style. He'd shower Sophie with gifts, buy her sweets, and let her get away with things I wouldn't. Come on, Hannah, he'd say. Let her be a kid. It bothered me, but I figured we balanced each other out. As Sophie grew older, it became clear she was a daddy's girl. She'd run to John with her problems, laugh at his jokes, and light up when he came home from work. With me, it was all eye rolls and yes, mom in that tone teenager's perfect. I'd bite my tongue, reminding myself that Sophie would understand when she was older. She'd see that my strict approach came from a place of love. But even at 17, Sophie remained firmly in her father's camp. It stung, but I consoled myself with the thought that I was doing right by her in the long run. Despite these small frustrations, I considered myself fulfilled. I had a successful career at a respected clinic, a husband who still made me laugh, and a daughter who, despite our differences, I adored. Life was good, or so I thought. Everything changed on a crisp autumn day. I was doing laundry, a mundane task I'd done 1,000 times before. As I emptied John's coat pockets, my fingers brushed against a piece of paper. I pulled it out, expecting a grocery receipt or a dry cleaning ticket. Instead, I found myself staring at a receipt from an upscale perfume store. The perfume listed was an expensive brand I'd never wear. Too floral, too sweet. John knew I preferred subtler scents. I stood there, the washing machine humming in the background, as 1,000 possibilities raced through my mind. Was it a surprise gift? But my birthday had passed, and our anniversary was months away. Was it for his mother? But she was allergic to most perfumes. With shaking hands, I took a picture of the receipt with my phone. Then, carefully, I placed it back in his pocket. I needed time to think, to process this information without jumping to conclusions. That evening, when John was in the shower, I checked his coat again. The receipt was gone. I kept my discovery to myself, not breathing a word to John or Sophie, but now that my eyes were open, I couldn't stop noticing things. It was like a fog had lifted, revealing a landscape I didn't recognize. John's late nights at work weren't new, but now they felt different. Big project, honey, he'd say, kissing me on the cheek as he left. Don't wait up, I'd nod and smile, all the while wondering who he was really meeting. His new haircut caught my attention too. He'd always been particular about his appearance, but this was different. Younger. Trendier. When I complimented him, he shrugged it off. Thought I'd try something new. The weekend fishing trips were the worst. Every other Saturday he'd load up his gear and head out to meet his buddies. Fish are really biting lately, he'd say with a grin. I'd watch him drive away, wondering if he even owned a fishing rod anymore. Before finding that receipt, I hadn't connected these dots. Now they formed a picture I couldn't unsee. The thought I'd been avoiding burst to the surface. John had a mistress. I tried to shake it off. This was John, my John. The man who held my hand through 20 hours of labor. The guy who surprised me with flowers on random Tuesdays. He wouldn't cheat. But the doubt gnawed at me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake, listening to John's steady breathing, wondering if he was dreaming of her. One sleepless night, I found myself scrolling through Facebook. A name caught my eye: Mike Thompson. We'd gone to high school together, and I vaguely remembered he'd become a private investigator. Before I could talk myself out of it, I sent him a message. We met at a coffee shop across town the next day. I took a deep breath and spilled everything. The receipt, John's behavior, my suspicions. Mike listened without interrupting, his face neutral. Mike agreed to take the case. As I watched him leave, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Soon I'd have answers, but did I really want them? The next 3 weeks were the hardest of my life. I went through the motions, smiling at my patients, helping Sophie with her schoolwork, making small talk with John over dinner. But inside, I was a mess. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd jump, thinking it was Mike with news. Every time John came home late, I'd search his face for signs of guilt. Every time Sophie mentioned her dad, I'd wonder if she knew something I didn't. "You okay, Mom?" Sophie asked one evening, catching me staring blankly at the wall. "You seem off." I plastered on a smile. "Just tired, sweetie. Lots of clients this week." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. I felt a pang of guilt for lying to her, but what could I say? "Your dad might be cheating on me, and I've hired someone to spy on him." John, caught up in whatever or whoever was occupying his time, didn't seem to notice anything amiss. Part of me was relieved, part of me was furious that he could be so oblivious to my pain. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was between clients when my phone buzzed. Mike's name flashed on the screen, and my heart leapt into my throat. "Hannah? Can we meet?" His voice was neutral, giving nothing away. We agreed to meet at the same coffee shop in an hour. The rest of my appointments were a blur. I went through the motions, smiling and nodding at my clients while my mind raced. Mike was already there when I arrived, a thick manila envelope on the table in front of him. My stomach dropped at the sight of it. "Hannah." Mike pushed the envelope towards me. "It's all in here. Photos, dates, locations. I'm sorry, Hannah, but your suspicions were right." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. The first photo hit me like a punch to the gut. John, my John, with his arms around a younger woman. They were laughing, looking into each other's eyes with unmistakable affection. "Who is she?" I managed to choke out. "Alicia Benson," Mike replied. "She's 28, works at John's company. She's the director's daughter." I flipped through more photos. John and Alicia at restaurants, walking in the park, boarding a yacht. Each image was a fresh wound. "They've been seeing each other for over a year," Mike continued. "From what I've gathered, it's serious. They've talked about a future together." I nodded numbly, barely registering his words. Then a photo made me gasp. It showed John and Alicia at a cafe, but they weren't alone. Sitting with them, smiling and laughing, was Sophie. "No," I whispered. "It can't be." Mike's voice was gentle. "I'm sorry, Hannah, but Sophie knows about the affair. She's met with them several times. Those weekends she said she was with friends? She was with them on Alicia's yacht. There's more. John and Alicia have been buying Sophie expensive gifts. Designer clothes. Jewelry. I think they're trying to buy her silence." I don't remember the drive home. Thankfully, the house was empty when I arrived. I moved on autopilot, packing a small suitcase with clothes and essentials. I couldn't stay here, couldn't face John or Sophie. I checked into a hotel across town, my mind still reeling. Once in my room, I called my boss at the clinic and took 2 weeks off, unpaid. Family emergency. I turned off my phone and sank onto the bed. The envelope seemed to mock me from the bedside table. Unable to help myself, I opened it again. Sleep eluded me that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those damning photos. Sophie's smile as she hugged Alicia. John's arm around them both. My anger, which had started as a slow simmer, began to boil over. For years I'd been the understanding one, the peacemaker, the one who bent over backwards to keep everyone happy. Well, I was done with that. My eyes fell on my laptop. Without really thinking, I opened it and logged into my bank account. There it was, Sophie's college fund. I'd been squirreling away money for years, determined to give her the best education possible. It was my way of showing love, even when she pushed me away. Now, Looking at that balance, all I could think about was how Sophie had betrayed me. How she'd lied to my face, spent time with that woman, accepted her gifts. My daughter, who I'd sacrificed so much for, had stabbed me in the back. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Years ago, before Sophie was born, I dreamed of opening my own cosmetology office. But then life happened: marriage, a baby, mortgage payments. My dream got pushed aside. I stared at the account balance. It was enough. Enough to start over, to finally pursue my own dreams instead of everyone else's. You know what I said out loud to the empty hotel room? Screw it. This money isn't for Sophie anymore. It's for me. The words hung in the air, both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had a future, even if it wasn't the one I'd planned. Emotionally drained, I finally drifted off to sleep, my phone still turned off. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a blissful moment, I forgot everything. Then reality came crashing back. With a deep breath, I turned on my phone. It immediately exploded with notifications. Missed calls from John and Sophie. Voicemails. Text messages asking where I was, if I was okay. Their concern, which once would have melted my heart, now felt like acid in my veins. How dare they pretend to care now? I didn't bother listening to the voicemails or reading the texts. Instead, I got dressed, packed my bag, and checked out of the hotel. It was time to face the music. The drive home felt surreal. Part of me wanted to keep driving, to disappear and start a new life somewhere else. But I squashed that impulse. I needed closure. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw John's car and Sophie's bike. They were both home. Good. I walked in, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. John and Sophie rushed out of the living room, their faces a mix of relief and anxiety. "Hannah, where have you been?" "We've been so worried," John exclaimed, moving to hug me. Sophie chimed in, her voice shrill with concern. "Mom, are you okay? Why didn't you answer our calls?" I stepped back, avoiding John's embrace. A cold laugh escaped me, stopping them both in their tracks. Without a word, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I tossed it on the coffee table, photos spilling out. John and Sophie stared at the images, their faces draining of color. There they were, in glossy 8x10s, John with Alicia, Sophie with them both. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening. John was the first to recover, his shock morphing into defensive anger. "Hannah, it's not what you think," he started, his voice placating. "Alicia and I were just friends, and Sophie, she..." "Don't you dare drag Sophie into your lies," I cut him off, my voice ice cold. Sophie jumped in, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "Mom, please, I can explain. I only met her a few times, I didn't know." I held up a hand, silencing them both. "Save it, I know everything. The yacht trips, the expensive gifts, the dinners. Every lie, every betrayal." They exchanged a look, and I saw the moment they realized their act wasn't working. The mask slipped away, revealing the strangers beneath. John's face hardened, all pretense of remorse vanishing. "Fine," he said coldly. "You want the truth? Yes, I'm with Alicia. She's young, beautiful, and rich. She makes me feel alive in a way you haven't in years." His words were like a slap to the face, but I refused to flinch. Instead, I turned to Sophie, waiting for her contribution to this character assassination. She didn't disappoint. "Alicia is amazing, Mom," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's successful, stylish, fun, not strict and boring like you." I absorbed their words, each one a fresh wound. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. "I see," I said, my voice steady. "Well, let me tell you both something. John, I want a divorce. I'll have my lawyer contact you." John's eyes widened, but before he could speak, I turned to Sophie. "And you, young lady, you can forget about me paying for your college tuition. If Alicia is so amazing, maybe she can foot the bill." Sophie's jaw dropped. "What? You can't do that. That's my money. I've been counting on it. I want to get into my dream school." Should have thought about that before you stabbed me in the back, I replied, unmoved by her crocodile tears. Mom, please, she sobbed, her cool demeanor crumbling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Please forgive me. I need that money. But her earlier words echoed in my mind. Strict, boring. Worse than the other woman. Ignoring their protests, I went upstairs and packed the rest of my belongings. As I came back down, suitcase in hand, John blocked my path. Hannah, let's talk about this rationally, he said, his tone businesslike. The house, our assets. My lawyer will be in touch, I interrupted, pushing past him. I'm done talking to you. The next few weeks passed in a blur. I found a small apartment and threw myself into the logistics of dismantling a 20-year marriage. I hired a lawyer and requested a mediator, determined to handle this divorce as cleanly as possible. The last thing I wanted was a drawn-out, messy court battle. Sophie called incessantly at first. When I didn't pick up, she resorted to texts, then emails. Each message was a mix of apology and demand. I read each one, my heart breaking anew every time. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself staring at my phone, Sophie's number on the screen. My finger would hover over the call button, a war raging inside me. Part of me yearned to hear her voice, to believe her apologies. But then I'd remember her cruel words, her secret meetings with John and Alicia, and I'd put the phone down. Days turned into weeks. Each meeting with John was a test of endurance, conducted in the sterile environment of our lawyers' offices. The man I once loved was now just another face across the conference table, all business and cold efficiency. One day, as I settled into my usual chair, the door opened and Sophie walked in behind John. My heart clenched at the sight of her, but her expression stopped any warm feelings cold. She looked at me with a mixture of condescension and triumph that took my breath away. "Hello, Mother," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you don't mind me joining today." Before I could respond, she continued, "I just wanted to let you know that I won't be needing your pathetic money after all. Alicia has generously offered to pay for my education at any top college in the States." She paused, clearly savoring the moment. "Oh, and I'll be living with Dad and Alicia from now on. We're going to be one big, happy family." I felt the eyes of our lawyers and the mediator on me, waiting for my reaction. But I was too tired, too drained to feel much of anything anymore. I simply shrugged. "If that's what you want, Sophie," I said, my voice flat, "I hope you'll be happy." Something flickered in her eyes, disappointment. Had she been hoping for a bigger reaction? But it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same smug look. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of legal jargon and asset division. In the end, John and I split everything down the middle. The house would be sold, with the proceeds divided equally between us. With my share from the house sale and the money I'd saved for Sophie's college fund, I had enough to make a fresh start. I found a small but cozy apartment and, after much soul-searching, decided to take a leap of faith. I quit my job at the clinic and threw myself into creating a business plan for my own cosmetology office. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. All those years of experience, all the dreams I'd put on hold, it was time to put them to use. Weeks of planning, renovating, and nervous anticipation followed. But finally, Hannah's Beauty Haven opened its doors. Those first few months were a whirlwind of long hours, social media marketing blitzes, and the slow but steady growth of my client base. In quiet moments, usually late at night when the day's work was done, I'd find myself scrolling through social media. Sophie's posts would appear on my feed, pictures of her in designer clothes, lounging on Alicia's yacht, always smiling, always looking carefree and happy. Each image was a knife to my heart. I'd wonder if she ever thought of me, if she missed me at all. When her 18th birthday rolled around, I sent her a message wishing her well. Same for her high school graduation. Both went unanswered. A year had passed since the divorce, and life had settled into a new rhythm. My cosmetology office, once just a dream, was now a thriving reality. The steady stream of loyal clients from my clinic days, combined with a growing number of new faces, kept me busier than I'd ever been. I'd even hired 2 assistants to help manage the workload. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, as I was finishing up with a client, my phone buzzed. It was my cousin, Sarah. "Hannah, you won't believe what I just saw," she said, her voice a mix of concern and disbelief. "I was at the Meadowbrook supermarket, you know, the one on the other side of town, and I swear I saw Sophie working at the checkout." My heart skipped a beat. "Sophie? Are you sure?" "Positive." She looked different, thinner, tired, but it was definitely her. I thanked Sarah and hung up, my mind reeling. Sophie, working at a supermarket. What about college? What about Alicia's promise to fund her education? That night, after closing the office, I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked up Sophie's social media. What I found shocked me. All her glamorous photos with John and Alicia were gone. There were no updates, no college move-in pictures, nothing. Her once active profile was a digital ghost town. For days I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to rush to the supermarket to demand answers. But another part, the part still nursing the wounds of betrayal, held me back. Finally, on my day off, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the Meadowbrook supermarket, my heart pounding as I walked through the automatic doors. And there she was, Sophie, my baby girl, looking so different from the confident young woman who'd sneered at me in the lawyer's office. She was thin, almost gaunt, dark circles under her eyes as she mechanically scanned items at the checkout. Our eyes met, and I saw a flash of something. Embarrassment? Shame? Before I could decipher it, she looked away, her cheeks flushing. I approached her checkout, my steps hesitant. "Sophie." She glanced up, then quickly back down at the register. "What do you want?" Her voice was harsh, defensive. "I'd like to talk. Maybe we could get coffee after your shift." "I don't want to talk to you," she snapped, still not meeting my eyes. "Please leave." "Sophie, please." I said leave. She finally looked at me, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and something else. Was it fear? Stunned by her vehemence, I backed away. Other customers were starting to stare. With a heavy heart, I left the supermarket, climbing into my car with shaking hands. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of questions. What had happened? Where were John and Alicia? Why wasn't Sophie in college? For days after, I waited for a call, a text, anything. But my phone remained stubbornly silent. I thought about going back to the supermarket, but Sophie's words rang in my ears. "I don't want to talk to you." Just as I was beginning to lose hope, my phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. With a mix of trepidation and curiosity, I answered. Mom. Sophie's voice, small and uncertain, came through the speaker. "Can we meet, please?" We agreed to meet at a small cafe near my office. As I waited, my mind raced with possibilities. When Sophie walked in, my breath caught. She looked so different from the glowing, confident girl in those yacht photos, so much older than her years. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of unsaid words hanging between us. Finally, Sophie spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for everything." And then, like a dam breaking, the story poured out of her. At first, living with John and Alicia had been a dream. Designer clothes, yacht trips, promises of a bright future. But the honeymoon period didn't last. Alicia started making comments, Sophie said, her eyes fixed on her untouched coffee. Little digs about how much space I took up, how expensive I was. Then she told Dad I couldn't live with them anymore, that there was no money for college. I gasped. "But your father?" Surely he didn't agree. Sophie's bitter laugh was answer enough. He said I was an adult now, that I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. "They kicked me out, Mom. I had nowhere to go." "Why didn't you call me?" I asked, reaching for her hand across the table. She pulled away, tears in her eyes. I was so ashamed. And then I realized, this must be how you felt when we betrayed you. I couldn't face you after that. My heart broke for her, even as a small, petty part of me whispered, "Good. Now she knows how it feels." "I'm sharing a crappy apartment with a coworker," Sophie continued. "The supermarket job barely covers rent and food. I feel so useless." I wanted to wrap her in my arms, to tell her everything would be okay. But I knew it wasn't that simple. Sophie, I said gently, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but you're right, you did betray me. Actions have consequences, and this is something you need to work through. We both cried then, mourning the lost year, the broken trust, the pain we'd caused each other. As we parted, something had shifted between us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. That night I tossed and turned, Sophie's story playing on repeat in my mind. By morning I'd made a decision. I called Sophie. I have a proposition for you, I said. I need an administrator at my office. The pay's not great, but it's better than the supermarket. And maybe we can start rebuilding from there. There was a long pause. Then, yes, I'd like that. Thank you, Mom. It's been 6 months since that day. Sophie works at my office now, learning the business from the ground up. She's saving for community college, determined to make it on her own merit this time. Our relationship is a work in progress. There are good days and bad days, moments of connection and moments of tension. The trust we once had is slowly, painstakingly being rebuilt, one day at a time. As I watch Sophie greet a client with a warm smile, I feel a glimmer of hope. We're not the same people we were before the betrayal, the divorce, the year of silence. But maybe, just maybe, we can be something new, something stronger.
This story is titled, My Fiancé Made Fun of My Career at Her Office Party. I broke off the engagement right in front of everyone. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey Reddit, I've been sitting on this for a while, trying to make sense of what went down, but I eventually decided to post it. 30 male, work as an electrician. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I love my job. Sure, it's not the kind of thing people put in movies or brag about at fancy dinners, but I've been working with my hands since I was a teenager, and it's what I'm good at. I didn't just stumble into this either. I worked hard to get here. I spent years going to trade school, juggling side gigs to afford my tools, and putting in long hours as an apprentice to learn the ropes. I had to prove myself every step of the way, especially in a field where your reputation can make or break you. I've spent countless hours mastering circuits, panels, and wiring, and there's something incredibly satisfying about fixing something broken and seeing it work again. Plus, I've built a pretty good life from it. I run my own small business, where I handle everything from home repairs to custom lighting setups for businesses. It wasn't easy getting to the point where I could be my own boss, but it was worth it. Now I have a nice truck, loyal clients, and I'm saving to buy my first house. It's not flashy, but it's honest work, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've always been proud of where I am, but I'll admit, I've had to deal with people looking down on what I do. You know the type, the ones who think real success is sitting in a cubicle or having a long title like Senior Executive something something. I thought my fiancée, Lisa, 30 female, wasn't one of those people. Lisa and I have been together for about 4 years. She works in corporate marketing, which is a world I don't really understand, but always tried to respect. She's ambitious, driven, and polished in a way that made me feel like a regular guy standing next to a magazine cover. She's the kind of person who plans everything, from our weekend brunches to our 5-year goals. I liked that about her. I thought we balanced each other out. Me, the hands-on problem solver, and her, the polished go-getter. In the beginning, Lisa would tell me how much she admired my work ethic. She'd say things like, I love how passionate you are about what you do, or, you're so good with your hands, it's impressive. I ate that up because it felt good to have someone in my corner, especially someone like Lisa, who could have had her pick of any suit and tie type, but went out of her way to pursue me. I remember asking her once why she was so interested in me, and she said, because you're a real man. But now that I'm looking back, I think there were signs that she didn't really respect me or what I do. It's just that I ignored them. For example, there was this one time when we were talking about future goals, and I said I wanted to expand my business, maybe hire a couple of guys to work under me so I wasn't always on the job myself. Her response? That's cute, babe. You'd be like a little boss. I laughed it off at the time, but now it feels like one of those comments that wasn't as innocent as it seemed. Then there was the way she talked about her own career. She'd go on and on about how hard it was to get where she is, how she had to prove herself in a male-dominated industry, and how she's always working twice as hard as everyone else. Don't get me wrong, I respected the hell out of her hustle. But looking back, I realized she never really asked about my work in the same way. Like, she never cared about the struggles I had running my own business, or the times I had to work 12-hour days in someone's attic during a heat wave just to make ends meet. Still, I never thought it was a big deal. I figured we just had different ways of showing support. She was all about big, flashy gestures, posting pictures of us with captions like, "So proud of my guy," while I was more low-key. I'd show up to her work events, listen to her vent about her boss, and make sure she had dinner waiting when she got home late. To me, that was enough. Things started to feel off earlier this year, though. Lisa got a promotion, and suddenly her life became all about networking and corporate events. She started talking about her colleagues constantly. This guy who's a rising star in the industry. That woman who's such a powerhouse. I noticed she didn't mention me as much anymore. When I asked about it, she brushed it off, saying, "You're not part of that world, babe. It's not a big deal." That stung a little, but I let it go. I figured she was just caught up in the excitement of her new role. Then came the co-workers' holiday party. Lisa had been talking about it for weeks. She kept saying it was a big deal, and that it was important I come with her. "You'll love it," she said. "You'll get to see the people I work with and the world I live in." I wasn't exactly thrilled about spending a night with a bunch of corporate types, but I figured it was important to her, and I wanted to be by her side, so I agreed. As the date got closer, I started to feel more and more out of my element. Lisa was planning everything down to the last detail. What we'd wear, what time we'd arrive, even what kind of conversations I should prepare for. "Just talk about your business," she said. "People love hearing about small businesses." That should have been my first red flag. Why would I need to prepare to talk about what I do? But again, I brushed it off. I wanted to be there for her, even if it meant stepping into a world that felt completely foreign to me. The night of the party, I put on my one good suit and did my best to clean up. Lisa looked incredible, like she always does, in this sleek black dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When we got to the venue, I realized just how out of place I was. The place was decked out with fancy decorations. Everyone was dressed to the nines, moving through the room like they were on a runway. I was trying my best to play along, even though this whole thing feels like stepping onto a set of The Office. But, way less funny and way more fake. People are walking around in their overpriced suits and shoes, talking about brand initiatives and quarterly projections. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to keep my tie from choking me to death. Lisa's in her element, though. She's laughing, working the room, and introducing me to everyone like she's the star of the show. Honestly, I was kind of proud of her at first. I mean, she's good at what she does, and it's obvious her colleagues respect her. But the more she introduced me to people, the more it started to feel off. It started small. Every time she'd introduce me, she'd throw in some little comment that felt like a jab. Like, "This is my fiancé. He's an electrician. He keeps things running around the house." Or, "If you ever need someone to fix your outlets, he's your guy." She'd laugh, and so would they. But I wasn't laughing. I brushed it off the first couple of times, telling myself she was just nervous or trying to be funny. But after the fifth or sixth time, I started to wonder if this was just how she talked about me behind my back. Anyway, Lisa and I were standing with a group of her colleagues when one guy, a real smug-looking dude in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my truck, asked me what I do for a living. I smiled and told him, "I'm an electrician. I run my own business. Simple and plain." Before he could say anything, Lisa jumped in. "Oh, he's amazing with his hands," she said, with this overly sweet tone that immediately made me cringe. "He's like my little handyman at home. Anytime something breaks, he's on it. Isn't that adorable?" Adorable. That word hit hard. The way she said it wasn't affectionate. It was condescending, like I was some kind of pet she brought to show off. The group burst out laughing, and I just stood there, trying to keep my face neutral. Inside, I was fuming. I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to make a scene. So I just smiled awkwardly and nodded like I was in on the joke. But I wasn't. I was done. The rest of the night didn't get better. Every time we talked to someone new, Lisa found a new way to put me down, whether it was calling me her fix-it guy or joking about how I probably didn't get their world of corporate marketing. At one point, I heard her telling someone, "Oh yeah, he's my little wires and pliers guy, like Bob the Builder, but less ambitious." I was standing there thinking, did she just reduce my job to a joke? I let it slide, trying to keep the peace, but it didn't end there. What really pissed me off was how casual she was about it. Like she didn't even notice she was insulting me. Or worse, she noticed, and just didn't care. The way she looked at me when she made those comments, it wasn't love or pride, it was a pity. Like I was some small-town guy who got lucky to be with her and should just be grateful for it. The worst part? Everyone else seemed to eat it up. They were laughing along with her like her insults were the funniest thing they'd ever heard. And why wouldn't they? In their eyes, I was just the blue-collar guy tagging along with the corporate queen. They didn't know me or what I'd built for myself. All they saw was what Lisa was showing them, someone to laugh at. By the time the toast happened, I was already checked out. Lisa stood up in front of everyone, looking like she owned the place, and started thanking her team for their hard work. I was halfway listening, just trying to get through the night without losing it, when she suddenly said, "And I want to give a special shout out to my fiancé." I looked up thinking, maybe she's going to redeem herself. But nope, he's not exactly a corporate guy, she said, grinning like she was about to drop the funniest joke of the night. But if anyone's dishwasher stops working, he's your guy. The room erupted in laughter. I sat there, frozen, as 100 pairs of eyes turned to me. My face felt like it was on fire. I looked over at Lisa, hoping she'd notice how humiliated I was, but she was too busy soaking up the attention. She was smiling, like she'd just won an award for most entertaining toast. I couldn't take it anymore. I excused myself and stepped outside to get some air. My hands were shaking, and my chest felt tight. I replayed her words over and over in my head, each one hitting harder than the last. Not a corporate guy. Your guy for power outages. What the hell had just happened? That wasn't a toast. That was a takedown. So, I'm standing outside this ridiculously fancy venue, breathing in the cold air and trying to cool off. The sound of everyone laughing at Lisa's toast is still echoing in my head. I don't know if I'm more embarrassed or angry, or maybe a mix of both. I kept thinking, is this how she's always seen me? Like some handyman she picked up for convenience? A few minutes later, Lisa comes outside. She's got this big, oblivious smile on her face. "There you are," she says, like I'm some kid who wandered off. "Why'd you sneak out?" I look at her, trying to stay calm, but I can already feel the frustration bubbling up. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" She blinks, clearly caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" "The toast," I say, my voice rising a little. "You basically turned me into a joke in front of your entire office." Lisa rolls her eyes, like I'm the one being unreasonable here. "Oh, come on. It was just a joke. Everyone thought it was funny." "Yeah, because they don't know me," I snapped. "All they know is what you told them. That I'm some not corporate guy who's good for fixing their dishwashers. Do you even realize how disrespectful that is?" She sighs, like she's talking to a child. "You're overreacting. It wasn't that deep. I was just trying to lighten the mood." Lighten the mood? I could feel my fists clenching at my sides. But I took a deep breath and tried to explain. "Lisa, I've worked my ass off to get where I am. I run my own business. I make a good living. And you reduced all of that to a punchline. How do you think that makes me feel?" Instead of apologizing or even trying to understand, Lisa crossed her arms and gave me this annoyed look. "I don't know why you're being so sensitive about this. It's not like I said anything untrue. You're an electrician. It's not exactly a glamorous job, and there it is. The truth, plain and simple." I stare at her, stunned. "Wow," I said. "So that's how you really see me? Like I'm just some guy with a toolbox who's lucky to be with you." "I didn't say that. You're putting words in my mouth. All I'm saying is that you need to learn how to take a joke. This isn't about me. It's about your insecurity." She started to yell, "My insecurity." I felt my blood boiling now. "This isn't about me being insecure. It's about you not respecting me or what I do. Do you even realize how condescending you sounded tonight? How condescending you always sound?" Lisa's face hardened. "You know what? Maybe I do think you're overreacting. And maybe you should consider why you're so defensive about your job. If you were confident in yourself, you wouldn't let a little teasing bother you." That's when I realized we're not just having an argument. This is a fundamental problem. This is who Lisa is. She didn't respect me, and she never has. I take a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "You know what, Lisa? I can't do this anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "Do what?" "This," I say, motioning between us. "Us. This relationship. I'm done." Lisa stared at me like I've just grown a second head. Then she laughs. A short, disbelieving laugh. "You're kidding, right? You're really going to break up with me over a joke?" "It's not just the joke," I said firmly. "It's how you see me. How you've always seen me. You don't respect me, Lisa. You never have. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being treated like I'm less than you just because I don't work in an office." Her expression shifted from disbelief to anger. "Are you serious right now? Do you even realize how ridiculous you sound? You think you're so special because you run a little business, fixing people's wiring? Well, guess what? It's not that impressive." Her words were harsh, but they solidified my decision. I pulled the engagement ring off my finger and held it out to her. "Good luck finding someone you actually respect," I said, calmly and firmly. She stared at the ring like it was going to explode in her hand. "You're making a huge mistake," she said. "No one else is going to put up with your fragile ego." I only replied with, maybe not, but at least I'll have my self-respect. And with that, I turned and walked back into the party to grab my stuff, leaving her standing there in the cold, with the ring still in her hand. The moment I stepped back into the party to grab my coat, the buzz of conversation and laughter hit me like a wall. The room was still alive, but I noticed people sneaking glances at me. I knew it was going to make a scene. Honestly, I didn't care. Let them talk about it for the next 5 weeks. Let them dissect every detail. I wanted this moment to stick with Lisa and everyone here. She'd spent the entire night tearing me down. Now it was my turn to walk out on my terms. As I reached for my coat, I heard the sharp click of Lisa's heels behind me. I knew she wouldn't let me leave without some kind of showdown. "You're really going to do this?" she hissed. She glanced nervously around, trying to make sure no one overheard. "Here? In front of everyone?" I turned slowly, locking eyes with her. I could feel all those curious glances from her colleagues, the way conversations were quieting as people tuned in. "Lisa, you already did this," I said, keeping my voice calm but loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "You crossed the line humiliating me in front of everyone. I'm just leaving before it gets worse." Her eyes widened for a split second before narrowing into a glare. "Don't be so dramatic," she spat, grabbing my arm with enough force to make my jacket wrinkle. Her nails dug into my sleeve as she tried to keep her composure. "No one even noticed. You're blowing this way out of proportion." I pulled my arm free and took a step back. "Really?" I said, raising my voice. "Because I'm pretty sure half the room wasn't laughing with you after your little toast. They were laughing at me, and you made sure of it." "That's not what happened," she snapped, her voice rising just enough to draw more attention. The hum of conversation around us dropped a notch. People weren't even pretending not to listen anymore. "They were laughing because it was funny," she insisted, her cheeks flushed with anger. "You're the one who's turning this into a big deal." I took a breath, steadying myself, and let the silence between us hang for a moment. "Lisa," I said firmly, "you turned me into a punchline. You made it crystal clear how little you respect me, and now you're acting like I'm crazy for being upset. Do you even hear yourself right now?" Her face turned bright red, and not from embarrassment. This was pure, unfiltered rage. She crossed her arms. "You're twisting everything I said," she shot back. "I was trying to include you. You should be thanking me for making you part of the conversation instead of sulking like a child." "Thanking you? You didn't include me. You mocked me. You made me sound like some dumb handyman who's only good for fixing your lights. That's not including me, Lisa. That's tearing me down so you can feel better about yourself." Before Lisa could respond, a voice cut in. "Hey, is everything okay here?" I turned to see one of her co-workers, a woman in a crisp suit, clutching, looking uncomfortable. Lisa whipped around to face her, putting on the fakest smile I've ever seen. "Oh, it's fine, just a little misunderstanding," she said quickly, her voice an octave higher than usual. The woman glanced between us, clearly unconvinced. "Well, if you need anything," she trailed off, giving me a sympathetic look before stepping away. Lisa's smile dropped the second her coworker turned her back. "Do you see what you're doing?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You're embarrassing me in front of my entire office." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that cut through the room. "I'm embarrassing you?" I said, shaking my head. "You spent the whole night treating me like a joke, and now you're worried about how you look? That's rich." I couldn't help but laugh, a sharp, biting sound that cut through the tension. "I'm embarrassing you?" I said, shaking my head. "You spent the whole night treating me like a joke, and now you're worried about how you look? Unbelievable." Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a tall man near the entrance watching us. He looked familiar. Then I realized it was Lisa's boss. He didn't say anything, but the way he crossed his arms and leaned slightly forward made it clear he was listening. Lisa noticed him too. Her face paled, and her whole demeanor shifted. "Can we just talk about this later?" she said, her voice suddenly softer. "You're making a scene." I shook my head, thinking, that's exactly what I wanted. "No, Lisa, we're not doing this later. We're doing it now. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life with someone who thinks they're better than me just because I don't work in an office. I deserve more than this. More than you." Lisa's eyes darted between me, her boss, and the growing number of people pretending not to watch. "Fine," she said, her tone practically spitting venom. "Walk away. But don't come crying to me when you realize no one else is going to put up with your fragile ego." I couldn't help but smirk, shaking my head. "Cry to you? You're joking, right? I'm not the one who's going to struggle finding someone who respects me." I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. My silence and the look on my face said it all, while staring at her, letting her words hang in the air. I wasn't going to stoop to her level. Instead, I turned to leave. "Good luck finding someone who'll tolerate you," I said. "Enjoy the party, folks." I said over my shoulder as I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear the murmurs spreading through the room, like ripples in a pond. People were whispering, exchanging glances, and I caught snippets of their conversations as I passed. Did you see that? What the hell was that about? I knew she was a bit much, but damn. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew the damage was done. Lisa wanted to be the center of attention, and now she had it. Not as the queen of the party, but as the woman who got called out in front of everyone. Let them talk. By the time I reached my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. I stood up for myself, and it felt damn good. Lisa could spin her story however she wanted, but I knew the truth, and so did everyone else who saw what happened. The days after the party were messy, to put it lightly. Lisa kept texting and calling me. They ranged from, "Can we just talk about this?" to full-on, "You're acting like a child," and everything in between. I didn't reply to any of them. Honestly, I needed space. I needed to figure out what the hell just happened and how someone I thought loved and respected me could treat me like I was a punchline. But Lisa wasn't the type to sit quietly. Oh no. By day 3, I started hearing from mutual friends. Apparently, she wasn't content to just blow up my phone. She needed to make sure everyone else knew her side of the story too. "She's saying you flipped out over nothing," one of my friends texted me. Like, "She's making it sound like you stormed out because you're too sensitive to handle a joke." Another one sent me screenshots from Lisa's social media. There it was in plain sight. A post about how she dodged a bullet because some people can't handle a strong woman with a sense of humor. The comments were filled with her friends hyping her up. "You deserve better. He sounds so insecure. Good riddance." Insecure. That word kept coming up, and it pissed me off every time I saw it. I wasn't insecure. I was tired. Tired of being belittled. Tired of being treated like I wasn't enough because I didn't fit into her perfect little corporate world. A couple of days later, I got a message that stopped me in my tracks. It was from one of Lisa's co-workers, someone I barely knew but who had been at the party. "Hey, I just wanted to reach out and say I'm sorry for laughing at that toast," she wrote. "Honestly, I always thought Lisa talked about you in a weird way, like she was settling for you or something. I didn't realize how bad it was until the other night. You didn't deserve that." That confirmed what I'd started to suspect. This wasn't just a one-time thing. Lisa had been looking down on me for a long time, probably since the beginning. I thought we were equals, partners. But to her, I was just the guy with the tools, someone she could control and joke about when it suited her. I started replaying our entire relationship in my head, picking apart every moment that felt off. Like the time she introduced me to her parents and said, "He's not your typical corporate guy, but he's great with his hands." Or the time she told her friends, "Yeah, he owns a business, but it's like, small, not stressful like my job." How did I not see it? How did I not realize she was never proud of me, never truly respected me? The real cherry on top came about a week later. I got a call from Lisa's best friend, Jen. Now, Jen and I had always been cool. We weren't super close, but we got along well enough. So when her name popped up on my phone, I figured maybe she was calling to play peacemaker or something. But nope. "I just thought you should know," Jen said. "Lisa's been telling people that she settled for you because she thought you'd be easy to control. She said she didn't think you'd ever leave her because you'd feel too lucky to have her." "She actually said that?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Yeah," Jen replied. "I didn't want to believe it at first, but after what happened at the party, I'm sorry, man. You deserve better." I thanked her for telling me, but honestly, I didn't know how to feel. I mean, I was already done with Lisa, but hearing that, it was like adding insult to injury. This whole time, I thought I was building a life with someone who saw me as an equal, and she was treating me like some charity case. After the dust settled, it was like a switch flipped in my life. Lisa and I were done. No more texts, no more calls, no more fake apologies or attempts to spin the story. My life on my end was looking brighter. I threw myself into my work, taking on more projects, and I decided to sell my engagement ring and use the money to book myself a trip to the mountains, a place I'd always wanted to visit but never got around to because Lisa wasn't into rustic vacation. Turns out sitting by a campfire and looking at the stars is a hell of a lot better than listening to people talk about brand synergy over tiny hors d'oeuvres. During that trip, I had a lot of time to think about what I wanted and what I didn't want. I realized I'd spent way too much time trying to fit into Lisa's world, letting her define my worth based on her shallow metrics. That wasn't happening anymore. Then came the ultimate bit of karma. About a month after the party, I heard through the grapevine that her antics at the party and her behavior afterward had caught the attention of her boss. Apparently, some of her coworkers had started talking about the incident, and it made its way up the chain. "She's been really tense at work," one of her colleagues told me. "It's like she knows people are talking about her behind her back, and it's driving her nuts." She even snapped at someone during a meeting last week, which is not like her. Another mutual friend shared a text from Lisa where she wrote, "I worked my ass off to get where I am, and now it's like one stupid night is all anyone remembers." From what I could tell, the realization was starting to sink in. She hadn't just lost me, she damaged her professional relationships too. The people who once respected her were now questioning her judgment. I didn't get all the details, but from what I heard, the higher-ups weren't thrilled about how Lisa represented herself. She was passed over for a promotion she'd been gunning for, and let's just say she wasn't happy about it. I won't lie, I felt a little satisfaction knowing karma had finally caught up with her. Not because I wanted her to fail, but because it felt like validation. Her attitude, her need to tear others down to build herself up, it wasn't just a problem in our relationship. It was who she was. However, these days, I'm in a much better place. I'm glad I ended the relationship before getting married and have kids involved, and each day I feel my decision was so right. I've expanded my business, upgraded my tools, and even started teaching an evening class for aspiring electricians. Sharing what I know and seeing people get excited about learning the trade has been a game changer for me. I've also reconnected with friends I'd drifted away from during my time with Lisa. Looking back, I realize how much of my life I'd centered around her. Her friends, her interests, her goals. Now, I'm focusing on what makes me happy, and it feels damn good. As for Lisa, I haven't heard from her directly since the breakup. She's still doing her thing, posting her cryptic quotes, and probably telling anyone who'll listen that she's the victim. But honestly, I don't care. The truth is, walking away from that relationship was the best thing I've ever done. It wasn't just about the party or the toast. It was about realizing that I deserve to be with someone who values me for who I am, not for how I fit into their narrative. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that respect isn't optional in a relationship. You can't love someone you don't respect, and you shouldn't try to stay with someone who doesn't respect you. So to anyone reading this who's in a similar situation, trust your gut. If someone's tearing you down instead of lifting you up, let them go. You'll thank yourself later. Thanks for sticking with me through all this. It's been a wild ride, but I feel like I'm finally back on track. And if anyone ever needs an outlet rewired, you know who to call.